people need to understand there are only two kinds of entities that really represent the interests of workers, and that's unions and employee-owned companies. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, with the Knights of Labor in the 1800s, 1890s, that was an organization that promoted both of those things. So at one point early on in the whole C2BE business, we were talking about, could we get the government, which now owned most of Chrysler, not so much Chrysler, but GM, to enable us to get the green patents that they weren't making to be produced for by worker-owned companies in Detroit, et cetera. Another idea that we ran up the flagpole in several places, including with the state government.
Let me just throw this out here. What I hear you saying is Deborah Groban Olson was a serial entrepreneur.
I've been a serial social entrepreneur, and I have been thinking about this idea of Mondragon in Detroit, or more importantly, industrial cooperative community in Detroit to help Detroit overcome some of its issues, particularly issues of unemployment and also intense reliance on large global corporations headquartered here, that once things got tough for them, decided that they really didn't need a lot of workers here and they would go get workers someplace else, which left the good people of Detroit who were living here with a problem.
The transition taking place in Detroit, which included the development of C2BE, the Center for Community-Based Enterprise, that was rooted in this idea that wasn't fully and purely worker cooperatives, but rather community-based enterprises as an entry point into kind of collective ownership.
Really was an introduction, and I know this now, but I did not know this at that time. It's an introduction to wealth building and community wealth building. So Deborah Groban Olson did that for me. She was my introduction to a whole new field that was just growing dramatically throughout the country, but not in Detroit. And that's wealth building and community wealth building, which is different from entrepreneur or for-profit business starting. And so that was really when I began to understand the possibilities.
Thankful for the role that Deb has played in bringing to the forefront of our minds the importance of worker-owner co-ops. And for many of us, she was the first person that we heard about this system of co-ops in Mondragon, Spain. And so she's been instrumental in helping to raise that awareness in the city of Detroit. And then also the work of C2BE has been instrumental in helping us understand that we're not just building individual co-ops, but we're really trying to build a cooperative economy. And so the support that C2BE has provided to various folks developing co-ops in Detroit has been instrumental in that.
What was the economic landscape of Detroit prior to the inception of C2BE? And you sort of laid it out in terms of the car companies and the corporate entities that were here and the offshoring of jobs, as we all know, as in Detroit, that is one of our legacies.
The other thing was the whole idea of community-based enterprise was a sort of a foreign idea. Everybody, many people sort of grew up thinking, I will go work for Ford or I will go work for GM. That's what people do in Detroit. And so when we did start C2BE, one of the things we were trying to do was lift up the concept of community-based enterprise. I mean, we gave it the name Center for Community-Based Enterprise, not Co-op Center, not Worker Ownership Center, because so few people even understood the concept that the first thing we had to do was lift up examples.
And it was a much easier step to get people to hear about, recognize, and start to think about what types of community-based enterprises would actually enhance people's life and community. And I think that as Deb championed that idea, it became a very, very powerful part of our thinking.
And because of wonderful support from LISC and the Skillman Foundation, and I have to say Karen was the first funder who funded C2BE along with
when I was at LISC at that time.
When she was at LISC at that time. We did these education events all over Detroit, showing people things like Detroit Black Community Food Security Network is such a thing. It's independent. It's not asking other people for money. They're doing it all themselves. They have both a buying co-op, they're building a farm, they're teaching people about organic farming.
They're building their own
store. They're doing all of these things, basically saying, we here can do something to build our own economy. We are not dependent on these big global companies.
Right.
And so we brought those examples. We brought examples from other places.
While some purists complain about some of these community-based enterprises as not really being worker co-ops, she said it was a good way to start a conversation with people about an alternative to the kind of business as usual entrepreneurship that was rooted, I guess, in individualism and capitalist values, and instead start talking about community values and the enhancement of community through these principles that often might lead to small mom and pop shops being supported, as long as they paid a living wage, as long as they tried to engage and relate to community, and as long as they held to the other values of kind of collective and democratic decision making when possible.
So we did 19 events all over the city. In various community places.
This was about 2000.
This is about 2009.
Deb Olson did 19 community forums. And so that was another, fascinating thing that I learned about my friend, that she not only was a learning leader, she not only was passionate and consistent in her values, and that invaded everything that she did. But she was a classic. She was just committed to excellence, and she overachieved. So with $25,000, she did 19 community forums, made our other grantees almost look like they were hardly moving. And so that impressed me so much.
So it's very clear you're a trailblazer. We know at C2BE that you're brilliant. You're tenacious. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for all of that. So how are you thinking about what does the legacy of Deborah Groban Olson look like? Part of it is C2BE.
As I made the transition to the Kellogg Foundation after 7 years at Skillman, I made the transition to Kellogg. And now the Kellogg Foundation is not only committed to early childhood and children, but they really understand that you have to have and help parents have economic well-being. And so the financial workforce, economic well-being, wealth building was critical in the Kellogg work. And so having made that learning journey with Deb Olson, it was now time for a bigger grant to C2BE. And it was time that C2BE become part of our racial equity work. And as you know, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation pioneered in the movement from not just civil rights work, not just racial healing, but racial equity.
Well, okay, I would say empowerment of people who have less power has always been the watchword of my life, in whatever way. So co-op organizing, working the civil rights movement, working the anti-war movement. Right now, my focus, besides I still do employee ownership legal work, but my focus is on helping particularly the Democratic Party and other related organizations fight voter suppression and do voter protection. And so voter protection, which used to be something that people like me did once every election for a day or two, is now a year-round activity. And one of the things that's important about it is, for example, I did it in Michigan during the last election, the last presidential election, but then for the 6 weeks after the election, when there was the Georgia Senate race, I was working with the people in Georgia. And one of the important things about what they did ballot curing. I'm not going to explain that. But they cured 20,000 ballots in Georgia. Biden won by 12,000 votes. So it really mattered. And it really mattered for the runoff, and it mattered for the majority in the Senate and all that. So that's currently...
Got it.
My view is, let's protect the world from fascism, and this is one way that we need to do it, to make sure that those people who have less power are not thrown out of the power equation, but are brought in.
Got it. Thank you for that, the legacy. Thank you very much.